Why don't we go ahead and get started? Thank you everyone for joining us today. I only have one announcement, which is the submissions for the MCLS 2022 in Belgium are due next week, February 11th. So make sure that you submit for that. Let us know if you have any questions. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Christina and Elise.
Yeah, so welcome everybody to our symposium. I'm Christina Artemenko. I'm from the University of Tübingen in Germany. And together with Elise, maybe you could also present yourself.
Hi, I'm Elise. I'm from the LaPsyDÉ in Paris. Yes, and Christina again.
Yeah, together we wanted to organize this symposium because our idea was that there's really a lot of research going on in the field of developmental research on numerical cognition and arithmetic and so on, but somehow there is a gap when you go further in the development and if you go to aging research. So what is the difference between numerical and arithmetic capabilities between older and younger adults? And so we wanted to address this topic, and it was quite hard to find a lot of people that already did some studies in this area, but we are really happy that we could put together a symposium and start this research field, maybe also here. And therefore we have three interesting talks ahead, and afterwards Patrick will discuss all this. And yeah, so I'm looking forward, and I don't want to lose some time for introducing everybody, so I would just hand over to Camille, and she will present some emotional aspects of aging effects on arithmetic.
Thank you. I'm going to share my presentation. Do you see my presentation? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so first of all, I have to say that I'm having some internet problems, so do not hesitate to tell me if you can't hear me or see me well during my presentation. So hello everyone, it's really nice to meet you in person, so to speak. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about my research today. My name is Camille Lallement, and I am in the second year of my thesis in arithmetic, emotion, and aging. And today, I will present you my latest work on this subject, directed by Patrick Lemaire. Oh, it doesn't work. Okay. So if I ask you to tell me as quickly as possible if this equation is true or false, I think everyone here will be able to do it easily. But if I now ask you to do the same on this problem, it feels much more laborious, doesn't it? This is exactly the issue of the research that I will present today. The goals were to determine what are the effects of negative emotions on mathematical cognition and how these effects of negative emotions on arithmetic performance change as we age. How negative emotions impact cognition has been studied in a wide variety of cognitive domains, such as attention, memory, decision-making, reasoning.
We don't hear you.
Camille, I think you froze, if you can hear us. Camille, can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Is it okay?
Now we can hear you. Yeah, but you froze a little bit.
No, you're
okay. Okay, sorry. So I was saying that sometimes negative emotions enhance cognitive performance, and sometimes negative emotions hinder cognitive performance. And researchers usually agree to account for this effect by assuming that negative emotions automatically capture participants' attention. This attentional capture leads participants to obtain better performance when emotions are, relevant to successfully complete the task. Conversely, this attentional capture leads participants to obtain poorer performance when emotions are finally disruptive and distracting participants from focusing on the target task, as was finally the case when I asked you to verify an addition problems which was presented superimposed on an unpleasant picture. Surprisingly, very few studies tested the role of negative emotions in arithmetic. To give you an example, in this study published by Shimak in 2005, participants were asked to tell which of two products was larger. Products were presented superimposed on neutral pictures like this one, or on negative pictures like this one. And Shimak found that participants were slower to in the negative condition than in the neutral condition. This result has been replicated in other studies on emotion and arithmetic. In other words, previous studies reported data showing that negative emotions disrupt arithmetic performance in young adults. However, no studies have examined how this impact of negative emotions on arithmetic performance change as we age. Therefore, our main goal was to determine how these links between emotion and arithmetic change with age during adulthood. Arithmetic is an important domain to test, to examine age-related differences in cognition, because several studies found that this is a domain where age-related decline in cognition is either much less important or even sometimes non-existent relative to other domains like memory, for example. And second, and consistent with our studies on emotion and aging found two important results. The first one is a so-called age-related positivity effect, showing that older adults are less influenced by negative emotion than young adults, as they are more biased towards emotionally positive information. And the second one is a better emotional regulation as we age. So all these previous findings led us to ask how older adults will react if we ask them to do mathematics under negative emotions. Would deleterious effects of negative emotions on arithmetic performance decrease, increase, or remain the same as we age? To answer this general question, we asked 39 young adults and 39 older adults to solve very simple arithmetic problems. We recruited them online via Prolific. And participants were asked to verify one-digit addition problems. In other words, they had to tell as quickly as possible if the addition problems were true or false. Addition problems could be easy or more difficult to verify depending on the size of the sum, and were presented superimposed on negative or neutral pictures from IAPS. And first, consistent with previous studies, we found that participants were slower to verify addition problems in the negative condition than in the neutral condition. If we call this difference effect of emotion, such effect of emotion could be explained by the attentional capture hypothesis. Indeed, negative pictures have captured participants' attention, leading them to be distracted away from the arithmetic task and therefore to be slower. We can think that participants needed to inhibit or to regulate negative emotions triggered by negative pictures in order to refocus on the target task. We were then interested in how these effects of negative emotions change with participants' age and problem difficulty. So as you can see here, we found effects of emotion in young and in older adults for easier and harder problem, easier other. But what we can observe, and this is the important result of this study, is that effects of emotions were larger in young adults than in older adults, especially on more difficult problems. So here, young adults seem to be more disturbed by negative emotion than older adults, even while solving very simple one-digit addition problems. Would this be also observed, and to what extent if we asked participants to solve more complex arithmetic problems? We addressed this issue in this second experiment. We tested 41 young adults and 46 older adults online. They were asked to estimate the results of two-digit multiplication problems. They had to choose between two proposed estimates, one obtained by rounding both operands down to the closest decades, in other words, by doing 80 by 30, and one obtained by rounding both operands up to the closest decades, in other words, doing 90 by 40. Multiplication problems could be easy or more difficult to estimate depending on the nature, the homogeneity of the unit digits, and were presented superimposed on negative or neutral pictures from high APS. And as you can see, consistent with the first experiment, we found that participants were slower in the negative condition than in the neutral condition to estimate the result of multiplication problems. We have already seen that this result could be explained by the attentional capture hypothesis. Second, and still consistent with the first experiment, we found effect of emotions in young adults and in older adults for easier and harder multiplication problems. Again, the important results of this study is that effects of emotions were larger in young adults than in older adults, especially for more difficult problems. So to conclude, we found a very similar result in both experiments. First, we found that negative emotions have deleterious effects on mathematical cognition. We already seen that this result could be explained by the attentional capture hypothesis. Indeed, negative pictures have captured participants' attention, leading them to be distracted away from the arithmetic task and therefore to be slower in the task. We can imagine that participants needed to inhibit or to regulate negative emotions triggered by negative pictures in order to focus on the arithmetic task, on the target task. Second, we found that these deleterious effects were larger on more difficult problems, which requires finally more cognitive resources than easier problems. And finally, we originally found that older participants are less impacted by negative emotions than young participants while solving simple or more complex arithmetic problems. One of our hypotheses to explain these results is consistent with the age-related positivity effects. Indeed, older adults' attention may have been less captured by negative emotions, leading older participants to be less distracted by negative pictures, negative emotions. Moreover, age-related differences in emotional regulation abilities could have led older participants to be more efficient at down-regulating negative emotions triggered by negative pictures, and to be more efficient, finally, at focusing on the arithmetic task. These findings, all these very interesting findings, have several implications for future studies. First, how do negative emotions lead participants to obtain poorer performance? The attentional capture hypothesis is the usual account for this effect. However, note that this account implicitly assumes that participants accomplish the arithmetic task or any other cognitive task with the same set of processes, the same mechanisms in negative and in neutral condition. Such an implicitly assumption has to be directly tested in future studies, as emotions may change the strategies used by the participants. Similarly, age-related differences in effects of emotions on performance may stem from differences in which strategies young and older adults use in the neutral or in the negative condition, and in differences in which in how they choose these strategies or execute these strategies. And again, these strategy hypotheses need to be tested in future studies. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Camille, for this super nice study. This is very interesting. Do we have questions?
Thank you.
Maybe I can start with a small question. So there was this interaction in young participants between hard and easy tasks and the emotional modulation. But this, am I correct that this is not present in the older subjects? Am I frozen or some? Hello?
I think Camille is frozen again.
Okay.
Maybe we go on and maybe later.
Okay,
Yeah,
maybe we can do
frozen.
that.
But
Yeah,
Elise, if
yeah.
you want, I can answer this question. You
Yes.
are perfectly right. There was an interaction of emotion and problem size in young adults, but not in older adults. In both experiments, young adults were much more affected by negative emotions when they solved large problems than when they solved small problems. Older adults were equally affected, much less so than young adults.
Oh, that's super interesting. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe we go on now to Laura. Laura, are you there? I don't see Laura. Ha, there she is.
So I'm here. I'm sorry.
Can you share your screen?
Yes, I will try. Yes.
Okay, great.
So I'm Laura Zamarian, actually Italian, but I'm living in Austria since 19 years, so a long time. And I thank both Elise and Christina for the invitation to this nice symposium. And I would like to present some data about aging and health numeracy. Why? Because actually a considerable part of health-related information contains numerical concepts, numerical terms. And very often these numerical terms are not only simple numbers like 100 or 5 or 80 or so on, but they may also concern complex numerical concepts such as proportions, 1/6, for example, or fractions, 3/4, or probabilities like 20%. Then that means ratio concept. And very, very often the understanding of such complex numerical concepts is a prerequisite for an advantageous decision making. There's evidence that ratios or complex numerical concepts may be challenging for several people. For example, children have difficulties with fractions and decimals, but also highly educated healthcare professionals may show low understanding of probabilities, risks, and chance-related concepts. And difficulties to understand and process ratios may lead, for example, to incorrect understanding of risks and benefits related to a specific medical treatment, or may delay the access to medical treatment, have a general negative effect on the medical outcome. Last but not least, people with low numeracy show a pronounced framing effect. That means they are more biased by the way in which information is presented. Now, there is evidence that demographical and specific cognitive factors may influence our ability to understand and process ratios. So to assess health numeracy, that means the ability to process and understand ratios in a medical context. We use health numeracy task adapted from Lipkus and colleagues 2001. These are two examples of this task. This task, people are required, for example, to convert percentages into proportions, or to add and subtract a defined percentage, to compare percentages, or to, in the adapted version, to show understanding of numerical information in a short patient information leaflet. And in the first study, we administered in 401 healthy participants as the older participants, the health numeracy task and a comprehensive neuropsychological battery. What we found was that lower health numeracy was correlating with advanced age, with lower education, female gender, and lower cognitive processing. We also found that the effect of age on health numeracy was partly mediated by mental calculation and executive function. So, and together with previous evidence, these results suggest that health numeracy declines with increasing age, and that specific cognitive functions are influencing the way in which we answer health numeracy tasks. In a second study, we focused on very old people, so aging 70 to 90. These were again healthy aging people. We test them again with the health numeracy task, but in this study we wanted to investigate the moderator effect of education on the influence of cognitive functions on performance in health numeracy. And what we found was a significant effect of education. That means of education on executive function and mental calculation in their influence regarding health numeracy. That means executive functions and mental calculation played a very important role on the answering of health numeracy task in people with low to intermediate education, but not in people with high education. And our hypothesis is that people with higher education have collected during education and during life much more experience with ratio concepts, so they have knowledge and they access this knowledge directly from memory to answer the questions in the health numeracy task. On the contrary, people with low education have less experience, less knowledge about ratio concept. They need to compute solution, therefore they rely much more than people with high education on executive function and mental calculation to answer health numeracy tasks. That means that people with low education and low cognitive function may be at disadvantage in such kind of task and in making health related decisions. In this study, we also found a positive correlation between good health numeracy performance and cortical thickness in specific frontal and temporoparietal areas. These areas, to the right dorsomedial prefrontal cortex, extending to the anterior cingulate cortex, and the right superior temporal gyrus extended to the supramarginal gyrus, are known areas being involved in on one side in decision making, on the other in number processing. In a third study, we tried to enlarge the age range and tested participants from 20 to 90. Again, all were cognitively intact. They perform a larger numerical, neuropsychological assessment battery, and results showed that, or that confirmed the mediation effect of mental calculation and executive function on the influence of age on health numeracy on the one side. On the other side, we could also confirm the moderation effect of education on the relationship between executive function and mental calculation with health numeracy, and this also by controlling for age and gender. In this study, what's interesting is are also the results regarding decision making. In the study, we also administered 2 decision making tasks, and everyday decision making tasks where people had to decide between 2 alternatives. As in the example here, between 2 rehabilitation clinics. The alternatives were containing 2 types of numerical information. One numerical information relevant for the decision, and one numerical information irrelevant for the decision. And numerical information was either presented as purely percentages or in a mixed form. That means percentages and proportions, so frequencies. The second task, this was a gambling task, and in this task, the gambling alternative, the winning probability of the gambling alternative was given as the proportion of red to blue items, where red items are the winning items. What we found was that the best predictor of accuracy in the everyday decision-making task was health numeracy, followed by mental calculation, education, gender, but there was no effect of age and executive function. else numeracy was also the best predictor of performance and the probability associated gambling task, where people just show abstract proportions, let's so say, or non-symbolic proportions. So concluding, what we can say from our studies is that the understanding and processing of complex numerical concepts like ratios decline with age. The highly educated people show a sort of advantage relative to low educated people, so they can rely less on executive function and calculation to answer questions containing a ratio concept. Therefore, they can rely on their semantic knowledge. On the contrary, people with low education may be more disadvantaged in case of cognitive impairment or more general cognitive impairment. And this is valid also across the lifespan. Numeracy predicts actually how well we make decisions. So I'm finished, and thank you for your attention. If there are questions, yeah, I'm very happy to answer them.
I have a question.
Thank you very much, Laura. Do I hear a question? Sorry.
Yeah, I had a question.
Yes.
Thank you, because it was very interesting and sounds also very important research. And I wonder, did you check, or do you have an hypothesis about whether specifically ratio is the important thing about making these sort of numbers related decisions? Sorry for the sound. It's my daughter practicing her trombone.
That's nice. Music is very welcome. Now, actually, so if you look at the literature in general, low numeracy is a problem. Or people with low numeracy are at disadvantage to make health-related decisions and decisions in general if these are concerning with risks, proportion, probabilities in any form. So it's not only the problem of complex numerical concept per se, but also people with cannot well do complex calculation or retrieve, for example, tables, multiplication tables, so are in a sort of way disadvantaged. So it extends actually also to also the easy part of the numerical domain. Yes, yes, and therefore. My suggestion is, at least to my children, please train on mathematical ability.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have further questions. Not currently. Okay. And thank you very much, Laura. Maybe later in the discussion.
Yes, thank you.
So then I think it's Thomas' turn now. Can you share your screen?
Yes. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah. So hi everyone. First, I would like to thank Christina and Elise for organizing this great symposium. So my name is Thomas Hinault. I'm an associate researcher at INSERM, and today we talk about cognitive aging during arithmetic task, and how considering the timing of brain activations and the synchrony between brain regions can provide a better understanding of the variability across individuals during the resolution of these complex tasks. And this work was conducted in part during my postdoc at Johns Hopkins with Susan Courtney. So aging affects cognition, and as Laura showed, this especially influences memory and cognitive control processes. So this will impact in turn arithmetic performance especially with complex operations. However, cognitive changes with age are associated with an important heterogeneity across individuals, with some individuals that will remain highly efficient with advancing age, while others show a stronger cognitive decline. And so understanding what causes this variability is a critical issue that requires the use of highly sensitive methods to link neurobiological changes to behavioral changes in each individual. So to this end, a tool we can use is connectivity analysis. So previous work showed that white matter fibers that constitute the network structure show decline integrity after 60. However, how age-related changes in structural network integrity impact their functional engagement, and more specifically, how these changes may affect the dynamics of the implementation of cognitive processes that are essential during arithmetic processing remain poorly known. And so that was the main goal of the study I'm about to present. Changes with aging could strongly influence the active maintenance of relevant information and the suppression of irrelevant information. So I studied dynamic connectivity using this nice neural synchrony with phase locking value. So the phase is the position at a given time on this waveform. And when the phase of two distinct brain regions recorded with EEG is similar between these two, we say that these two brain regions are synchronized. And this is essential for communication, for information transfer between these brain regions. These highly temporally specific communications are impacted with aging, and this would impair brain communications and in turn impair cognitive performance. Even if there is still some form of coupling in older adults, delayed activation and the alteration of the sustained synchrony over time would impair cognitive performance, especially in complex cognitive tasks such as arithmetic verification tasks. So we studied the resolution of arithmetic interference during equation verification. So this interference effect has been reported when you have to indicate whether a proposed result is correct or not. But when the proposed solution is the correct answer of another operation involving the same operands. So basically your performance would be lower if you have to verify 8 times 4 equals 12 than 8 times 4 equals 24, because that would be the correct answer for the addition. This effect was interpreted as resulting from the need to inhibit automatically activated yet irrelevant arithmetic fact during the resolution of these problems. So in this study, 40 young adults and 40 older adults completed an arithmetic verification task that engaged both the resolution of arithmetic interference, but also the active maintenance or updating of arithmetic operation in working memory. So first here, participants saw a cue indicating the arithmetic operation that had to be maintained. It could be multiplication or addition. Then participants saw another cue indicating whether they had to maintain the currently queued operation or to switch to the other one. So if hold is displayed, then they have to keep on maintaining this arithmetic operation. If flip is displayed, they have to switch to the other one. And they have to finally use the currently relevant operation to verify whether the third number below is the correct product or sum of the two numbers above. So here you would have addition, keep on maintaining the addition, 6 plus 9, 15, that would be correct. And as you don't see the operation here, you really have to efficiently maintain the relevant operation. So these problems could be true or false, and the resolution of arithmetic interference was assessed by using false related problems. So here you can see the multiplication is queued, but then you have to switch to addition. 6 plus 9, 54, that would be incorrect, but that's the correct solution for the multiplication. So you have to suppress the tendency to say, yes, this is correct. So this was done while EEG data was collected. And in addition to this task-related activity, participants came to the lab during a second session to undergo an MRI. And so we can collect structural and functional imaging. Both were combined to reconstruct the source of EEG activity. EEG activity by itself is not as precise in space. And so by using MRI information, you can be a bit more specific about where the activity you are recording came from. So we use this source activation to determine the synchrony of across brain regions during task completion, and to link this synchrony with the integrity of the underlying white matter tracks. So we could determine whether even small changes in white matter integrity, because this is healthy aging, there were no patients, but we wanted to investigate whether these changes would impact neurosynchrony. So in order to investigate the association between structural and functional connectivity, we used graph theory, because this can be used on applied on different modalities. Graph theory modeling considers brain networks as a network of regions more or less densely connected. And so we extracted parameters such as the efficiency or the clustering of these networks. The efficiency refers to the presence of direct connections between distant brain regions. And this is more efficient than to have to rely on many indirect connections. And the clustering refers to the presence of highly connected subnetworks within the whole network. And so the consensus in graph theory is that an efficient network presents a balance between these efficiency and clustering metrics. So we studied age-related changes in these parameters, but first I will show you the behavioral changes. So in young adults, first we replicated the arithmetic interference effect with lower performance, longer reaction time for false unrelated relative to false related problems. But this was only observed when the arithmetic operation was actively maintained throughout the trial, as no arithmetic interference was observed when people previously had to switch the activated arithmetic equation. This result was interpreted as a facilitation of inhibition. The fact that you have to suppress the no longer relevant operation would make you more efficient when you have to deal with arithmetic interference just after that. Interestingly, this facilitation of inhibition was not observed in older adults. As you can see here, arithmetic interference was significant regardless of the working memory queue, suggesting these updating and maintenance processes, especially the updating part, was not as efficient in older adults relative to young adults. So we looked then at EEG networked activity during this Q period in particular. So here you can see the 0 is the onset of the Q. What we found was in young adults first, so in green, was that following the Q onset, alpha clustering and gamma efficiency were lower for updating relative to maintenance when the flip Q was displayed. These modulations were not observed in older adults. Actually, the network changes were delayed and were reversed in older adults with increased clustering and no gamma modulation in older adults. So what the results suggest is that the disengagement of the no longer relevant operation is not as efficient in older adults as in young adults. So when you have to switch the currently relevant operation, you have to disengage from what was previously activity to engage new pathways in the network, and so this has to be both fast and efficient. And clearly, this was not observed in older adults, and the changes were largest in frontal and occipital regions. Then we looked at structural network to clarify the association between both functional and structural activity. So we performed the whole brain tractography to reconstruct the white matter tracks. First, without looking at behavioral performance, what we can see here is that the network clustering, so the network organization, is lower in older adults relative to young adults. So this clustering into subnetwork is not as specific in older adults. And so these individual levels were associated with both functional couplings and behavioral performance, especially the arithmetic interference following the flip condition, because that's where the age effect was the strongest. So first, we observed in older adults an association between the individual level of white matter integrity and the gamma synchrony between, especially between these two regions, so the inferior frontal gyrus and the occipital lobe. So the inferior frontal gyrus being previously associated with the updating of rules in working memory together with arithmetic facts retrieval. And so in addition to these association, we show that both measures were associated with arithmetic interference, and that EEG synchrony and tract integrity together were more efficient in predicting the variance of the behavioral arithmetic interference. So the amount of variance explained was significantly larger when taking these two dimensions together into account than only one of them. And to better understand the association between structural integrity and network dynamics and cognitive performance, we also perform data-driven subgroup definition using the integrity of the structural network in older adults only, because these subgroups were not observed in young adults. In older adults, we observed two subgroups that were similar in terms of age, gender ratio, level of education, or gray matter volume. But these two subgroups significantly differed both in terms of EEG activity during task completion and behavioral performance. Indeed, so you can see the two subgroups here, while one subgroup showed higher structural clustering, so the better preservation of the white matter network, and they also showed lower alpha clustering variability, so a more stable network and lower behavioral interference. The other subgroup showed altered white matter integrity, lower stability of the functional network, and increased behavioral interference. So this shows the high impact of even small variations of the white matter tracks cognitive brain regions to cognitive performance and the difference of cognitive performance across individuals. So at the conclusion, results suggest that cognitive performance and aging effect depend on the ability of the functional network engaged by the task. So during this type of arithmetic verification task of showing sustained levels of synchrony when maintaining relevant information, and of quickly and efficiently interrupting parts of the network that is not relevant during updating. And this is strongly modulated by the preservation of the white matter integrity connecting these regions. You can see in green the difference between older adults, individuals, relative to young adults here. So with aging, individuals with a preservation of structural integrity would show a better functional engagement and cognitive performance than others with larger structural alterations. I would like to thank the labs I'm working with, the funding, and thank you all for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much. Interesting topic, the neural correlates of aging in arithmetic. So any questions on this topic? No, I don't see.
Oh,
yes,
I'll be glad to
okay.
ask again, actually. Sorry. Can you elaborate a little? I'm not sure if you said it and I missed it, about what you know about the kind of structural changes that occur while aging. Are you talking about changes in connectivity, or and if yes, to which direction?
Yeah. Thank you for your question. This is a complicated question because we are in part limited by the methods we used. So here, this structural connectivity was based on DTI measures, so diffusion tensor imaging. So we can visualize these white matter tracks and compare these tracks across groups. So what we observed is a lower integrity of these tracks connecting distant brain regions in older adults. So that's the what, but the how dimension is a bit harder to explain, because what we know for sure is that there was no brain lesions in this group. Every scan was assessed by a radiologist. The overall integrity was preserved. It was not pathological aging. However, in this healthy group, there are several changes that could alter this white matter integrity, especially neuroinflammation, but also general, more like lifestyle parameters such as brain reserve. So it's really a combination of several parameters. Neuroinflammation would impair the ability of detecting the tracks. So with high inflammation, we would see smaller tracks. What we controlled are very general parameters, such as the level of education. As I presented, the subgroups we identified were not different in terms of level of education. So it must be more specific changes, and that we don't have the specific answer to.
Thank you.
And thank you again, Thomas, for your talk. And now I would hand over to Patrick for the discussion part.
Yeah, can you allow me to share the screen?
You should have access now.
All right, let me see. Can you see? Everybody can see it?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Well, first, thank you, Elise and Christina, for having this great idea of putting up a symposium on aging and arithmetic. I think it's a great topic. And in fact, we heard three important and nice talks that reported a number of important findings to discuss the issues that they raised and the new directions they should lead the field to. I will first recap with the general goals of this research and then talk about the features of each presentation to conclude with a general overview as to future directions. Right, so doing research on aging and arithmetic is making a two-way contribution. First, we want to know how aging informs arithmetic processes and performance. And second, we want to know how arithmetic and age-related changes in arithmetic performance informs cognitive aging, both at a theoretical and empirical level. In other words, we ask, how does arithmetic performance change during adulthood? And we ask from a theoretical perspective how age-related differences are coming from different or same mechanisms. We have to keep in mind these two broad goals when we think of the research that have been just reported. In fact, in the 3 talks, our friends and colleagues reported data that raises important issues and address these 2 important goals. With Camille's data, we talk about aging, emotion, and arithmetic. And Laura reported healthy and health numeracy as they change during adulthood. And Thomas looked at aging effects on dynamic brain network connectivity during arithmetic problem solving and interference resolution in particular. If we first think of Camille's talk, by the way, she sent me a text message saying she apologizes. She's trying to reconnect, her internet connection is shut down. We were lucky that she could finish giving her talk, but she sends apologies to everybody. Camille's examined age-related changes in emotion, arithmetic performance, interactions throughout adulthood. And she used a very clever device and procedure, which is called in the literature the within trial emotion induction procedure. You know, the role of emotion in cognition has been investigated via several procedures, and arithmetic cannot be investigated with all these procedures. The triggering or induction of emotion on each trial is probably one of the best approach to investigate the role of emotion in this domain and age-related differences therein. She investigated the effects of aging and problem characteristics, or the modulating factor of age and modulating factor of problem characteristics on how emotion and arithmetics are linked. She found that emotions lead to decreased performance, replicating some previous studies, but most originally she found out that negative emotion in particular do not have the same effect in the same domain in young and older adults. She found beautiful age-related differences in the effects of emotion on cognition. Another way to say it is that she found different aging effects depending if you test young and older adults on their emotional states or on their neutral states. And that has huge implication in the psychology of aging. And I think this is one of the beauties of our field in arithmetic, is that we can shed important lights on very general issues outside the domain of arithmetic. This is one of the points I will come back to in my conclusion section. What she also found are the effects of emotion interact with problem difficulty, but differently so in young and older adults. Now, the issues that these data raise are both theoretical and empirical, some of which are common to the 3 talks we heard today, and some of which are specific. Regarding future empirical issues, I could ask Camille if she thinks that we would find modulating influences of emotion during adulthood on other problem characteristics that have been known for 20 or 30 years of research in arithmetic, such as the interference, like Thomas has investigated, or the odd-even status of operands, or the split between products, proposed problems, proposed answer and correct answer, and so on and so forth. From a theoretical point of view, Camille did raise the issues in her discussions. Now that we know that emotions influence arithmetic, and we have experimental evidence for it. Before, when we work on math anxiety, for example, we only have correlational studies. We need much stronger and more rigorous evidence. Experimental studies can yield that kind of evidence. But now that we have them, now that we know emotions' effects on arithmetics change during adulthood, we want to know, how do these emotions negatively influence people's performance, and how these effects change during adulthood? Camille discussed the limitations of the currently proposed hypothesis. These are formulated in very general terms, like attentional capture. Your emotion capture your attention, therefore you cannot focus on arithmetic, therefore you have poor performance. But this kind of a hypothesis is too vague and too general. In fact, in my last book in 2022, where I reviewed the role of emotions in all cognitive domains, we have the same limitations. We have only broad, vague, and general explanation, but we don't ask the right questions. Of course, I'm a bit daring here, but who am I to dare say things like that? I mean, do we know if emotions change the mechanics of the brain or the mechanics of the mind when we accomplish cognitive tasks? Or do we accomplish the task the same way under emotional states and neutral states with the same set of mechanism? In fact, now I'd like to suggest Camille to use a much broader perspective, like the strategy perspective that I have developed in the past when investigated cognitive aging. In this 2016 book, I review in a number of cognitive domains evidence showing that young and older adults performance is often associated with differences in the kind of strategies that people use to accomplish cognitive tasks, with how often they use the best strategies and with how they execute these strategies. In fact, we can ask the same questions in the role when we investigate the role of emotions on cognition and age-related differences therein. But you're going to see me repeating that for each of the two other talks too. I'll try to decline them in a bit more specific way. What I like in Laura's talk is that she convinced us that health numeracy is a really nice test bed for understanding complex arithmetic concepts, and also concepts that have a high daily life relevance, not only in young adults, not only in older adults, like she really emphasized, but also in young adults. And we've seen people's attitude with COVID as a very common current example. And Laura asked, how do older adults understand such complex information and when they have better or poor performance than young adults? At a much broader level, what I like in her data, or at least the way she looked at them, is that they bring important contributions of a long-standing issue with regards to the domain general, like executive functions, or the domain specific, like calculation mechanism, not only to arithmetic performance, but also to age-related changes in understanding of complex health numerical information. Laura brought a number of important empirical contributions. I'm amazed by the large samples she was able to test, among other nice features of her studies. She showed that aging leads to decreased processing and understanding of complex information like ratio, despite their long life experience in this domain. She showed that this aging effects interact with people's education, even for very daily life relevant information. But also she showed a beautiful interaction between age and tasks, such that effects of aging can be larger in some tasks, like her EDDM task, than in other tasks, like her PAG task, even if both tasks rely on processing similar health information and even similar concept. What are the further issues that she raised? But similarly, now we want to know if this age-related deficits that she found are the results of poor understanding and some strategic variations such that the older adults don't really process this health related information or the ratios with exactly the same mechanism as young adults. And I think there is a huge venue for future research. I don't know, Laura, if you're pursuing this line of research, but you have a number of studies to run until you retire, I'm sure. Now, Thomas was a bit intimidating, don't you think, with the use of this sophisticated technology, data analysis? Well, actually, he looked at the neural, both structural and functional basis of age-related changes in cognitive performance above and beyond arithmetic. But more originally and specifically, he looked at the dynamic network connectivity as a new and original window to further understand age-related differences in processing some arithmetic component processes, like the interference manipulations that he did together, combined with his flip-hold manipulation. The sophisticated statistical analysis and brain technology for analyzing his data, both brain imaging and also performance, which is what I like, go well beyond the usual brain behavior correlations that we've seen in the field for about 20 to 30 years. He showed that aging leads to changing in processing arithmetic interference, and that it was a very important, specific, but very insightful age by flip-hold interaction. This is where we know where the field of arithmetic is very mature, because like in some very well-advanced fields, we can pinpoint some specific mechanisms and really analytically address some issues like aging effects and like underlying neural basis for these effects. He showed that age-related differences in behavioral performance with his beautiful mediation and moderation analysis are associated with differences in dynamic brain connectivity, like, for example, is evident in his reduced clustering in older adults. I thought that was really cool data, as well as the altered EEG synchrony. He was not happy to just look at EEG time course like we usually do, but he also looked at the synchrony. And I think this is really, really nice and opens up new venues of research. Of course, like in the two other talks, there are some empirical issues that his data raise, as well as theoretical issue. From an empirical perspective, we could just give an example, like would the same effects on dynamic brain connectivity be found in conditions where there are no behavioral performance in the aging effects? Because Thomas found different dynamic brain connectivities, but they are correlated with different behavioral performance. You know, arithmetic is a beautiful domain because to investigate age-related differences in cognition, we have the chance that this domain is undergoing much less aging impairment than many other domains. This could be a nice context to investigate whether different dynamic brain connectivities and other neural bases of cognitions between young and older adults are the results or result in differences in behavioral performance. So in other words, what his beautiful data suggests as an issue to address concerns the causal relations between dynamic brain connectivity and or neural correlates of arithmetic performance. To wrap up, let me conclude with some generalities. I think the three talks we've had today raises new issues in arithmetic and more generally in math cognition. We've seen that with Laura that we can address some very complex concepts and age-related differences therein, like the ratio processing, for example. we've seen that we can look at the neural basis of arithmetic processing and performance in order to shed light in the psychology of arithmetic, but above and beyond in human cognition. And Camille's data shed important lights on the effects of emotion on arithmetic. At a broader level, we have a domain here that can inform the mechanisms underlying daily life information processing, as well as the dynamic brain connectivity underlying behavioral performance and age-related differences therein, as well as emotion cognition interactions and age-related differences therein. So you understand why somebody like me is really excited by the talks that we've heard today. I want to thank the presenters for giving us great food for thought, and again, the organizers for putting up a set of nice talks together.
Thank you very much for summarizing all these talks and giving some new directions in which this field can go. So thank you very much. So I would like to ask everybody again if there are any questions, since we are already a bit of over time. But yeah, I would like to give the opportunity for questions again. Okay, so if there's nothing urgent to discuss right now, yeah, so I would like to thank all the presenters for their talks and the discussant for the discussion afterwards. And so thank you very much for coming together for this symposium. And I really hope that now in future we can forward this field of age-related effects on arithmetic, on numerical cognition a bit broader and so on, and learn also what this means for the field. Again, like not only like informing aging research, but also informing numerical cognition research on the other hand by these age-related mechanisms. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening and staying here. And yeah, see you hopefully soon in person.
Thank
See
you.
you at MCLS.
And thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye.